Now for the analyzation of the news. There were several tonight that had to do, I believe, with experts. I don't know whether they handed me all of them to be analyzed. Among man's experts, here's the first one. There are no experts on man. And well, we can go with that. There were several more. If you consider what experts are, in last news time, if you recall, there was a definition that said expert, and the definition was who cows look to. And those of you who have been keeping up with these shows and sending in your coupons, you understand that cows represent the collective intelligence of man oftentimes. They're talking about the herd, not in a disparative sense, but it's in what ordinary civilized people believe to be true at any particular time. And amongst those people, amongst the herd, there always has to be a pack. If you like pack, some of you seem to feel less offended when we refer to man allegorically having to do with larger primates like wolves as opposed to bovines. And so if you like pack better than, or flock better than you do herd, but it not being an insult, the point being that when you have the collective intelligence of man, within that, the herd, there must be a leader. And this on the basis that, collectively speaking, or from an individual view, if you look at the collective intelligence, then the collective intelligence has nothing to do with the individual members' understanding, if they have any. And therefore there must be leaders, which is part of what man's institutions are, of all forms, shapes, and colors. And all the way to what seems to be specific leaders, whether they be in institutional settings such as a famous priest or rabbi, or whether it be academically of some well-known economist, or if a governmental president or prime minister. There's always that position that seems to be an expert. And if you can think nonpartisanly at all, then you know without any rancor, which of course he's no longer in office, but without any rancor whatsoever, you understand that the experts do not know anything that man individually wants to know originally, back when you were a kid, back before your hormones began to go downhill and your neurons thought, well, what the hell, if they're going to coast, I will too, and you gave up. We've been through all that. And we found out that at least on weekends it's easier to take drugs than it is to try to think. A lot easier. Which, of course, is why man's institutions always have it in for drugs. Somebody was pointing out again tonight a brand new article that they said they enjoyed about the latest almost breakthrough, it sounded like, from one guy's view, some psychiatrist, that he's been using some new drug on his depressed, psychotic patients, and they're having miraculous recoveries, and he's wringing his hands. This is an old story. I think we've had some news item point that out. I assume you know. Let's make it real obvious and point blank. You do know that within almost any tolerable range, the things, those aspects of human psychology known as neuroses, psychoses, I assume, but now all of you know that they can be treated by drugs. When I say treated, I shouldn't be using that kind of flim-flam jargon. They can be stopped by drugs. Stopped. And if it's not drugs now that Kimberly and Clark, that's toilet paper. All right, whoever. For those of you who didn't get that news item from last time about people being shit up the creek. Splitzer. If it's not drugs now on the market, it's alcohol. And if it's not alcohol, it is drugs. It's some kind of root that somebody in South America or somewhere right now sucking on. There are drugs that will stop everything, not treat it, stop it. Therefore, it's denounced. But do you understand why by now? I know they'll play around with it, and according to this psychiatrist, what the new drug is, the story I heard, it's available. But you do understand by now that is not going to be a widely accepted, it's not going to be an institutionally accepted form of treatment. If the guy, I'm just, without reading the article, it doesn't matter. If this doctor comes out and let's say he picks out some particular clinically diagnosed psychological malady, some neurosis or psychosis, and specifically this one, he brings on person after person. and they're having 99.9 cure rate with this drug. You do know that 2 or 3 years from now you won't even hear the drug. Well, for one thing, already, I'm sure there's already an article out, and somebody's already writing an article that just may not be published yet, pointing out that this is not the way to treat psychological problems. Oh yeah, the writer will say, they may be having some sort of ephemeral, temporary placebo-type effect, but these kind of problems are not genetic, not the ones he's treating, and therefore you cannot treat them physically through drugs. It's going to take something else. We've got to work on the environment. We've got to work on the man's personality. We've got to do something. This can't work. And the reason that they say it can't work is because it will work. And if it did work, and they were faced with having to face it, then you're faced with, wait a minute, there is no struggle between what makes people act unusual and feel discomforted in life. Is it their environment, or is it their genetics? That would no longer be a party game. And therefore, it cannot happen. But for anybody who thinks that that is something new, also notice that long before there was an institution of psychiatry, there was an institution of religion. And what's one of religion's primary kicking post? Drugs of all form. Because drugs will do exactly the same thing that religion says is their intent. They were there before psychiatry. But everything that religion says, if you're religious, if you're a mystic, if you were truly godlike, then, and they describe how you'd feel and how you'd think, you can do it with drugs. And therefore, you can't do it with drugs. I'm sorry. Now back to where we were. Was it about right here, wasn't it? Among man's experts, there are no experts on man. The reason I got off the little side course is if you are still without rancor and can realize that experts, individual or institutional, do not know that which man wants to know individually at one time. Back when you were a kid and your brain was really itchy and horny. And before you got over it. Nobody knows. Not collectively. No cow. Nobody in the herd. Nobody in part of the collective and no part of the collective intelligence of man knows what it is that those individuals who never get over it, or who everybody wanted to know at one time, the collective does not know it. But that is one of the reasons, rather than stop there, because if we were ordinary, you could take that as being yet another, as though it needed it, attack upon the social fabric of humanity. You can't stop there. There are no experts, and that's why you have them there. That's why you have an expert in any field, religion, philosophy, psychology. So you can go to the man, and he's got expert written all over him, and if it's not over him, it's on his walls, everywhere. Expert, expert. And you say, are you the expert in this particular area of religion, or of psychology, or of finances? And the man goes, well, that's what they say. And you say, well, let me ask you this direct, point blank, real, I know it'll sound crude, which scares the hell out of them immediately, because they know that it's going to be even harder to put the old, if you don't know, in higher academic circles, it's known as the old flim-flam. They call it something else. But as soon as you say, well, now I don't have much education, and I may not be expressing this question in the right way, they begin to sweat already, because they know it's going to just be right in their face like, why is so-and-so, why is the sky blue? It's that kind of thing. They're going to be flashbacks to when they had a 5-year-old in the back seat of the car and they're on the way to Jacksonville, and the kid goes going, Daddy, why is the sky blue? And Daddy thinks, God, I'll be glad when he grows up and I get my chancellorship at the university and I don't have to put up with those dumb questions. Because then, once he's able to hide his personal relationship with ducks, and he does get appointed at least chancellor, or at least dean of the university, then he is normally accustomed to being confronted by very complex, sophisticated questions. Like what relationship might it be between the electromagnetic spectrum and the way the human eye works that causes sometimes the illusion of the sky, changing colors, or primarily being blue when obviously, if you get outside the atmosphere, it's in fact black, as we know now from space. But, that kind of complex question was news on tonight. The more apparently complex the question, the greater the number of cows who will show up to talk about it. That's what he wanted to do. But did you follow all this? They finally got to be president of the university, or head at least of the philosophy or physics department, And now the students that show up, the bright-eyed young students, 19 or 20, with these very complex questions that they read in some magazine. Because it is very complex, wandering, and ultimately meaningless, and therefore he can respond. He can nod along, or yes, yes, yes. You know, the longer the question, the better. Yes, 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 yes. And finally the student, the questionnaire, gets tired and it's, your turn. So he says, that is a very interesting question. You might also be interested to know. One of my first papers back in 1957, and so he goes off, and the student begins to doze. Now he likes that, but now if you show up, you didn't lose your place today. If you show up and say, I don't have no education. He goes, well, I didn't think I'd seen you here at the university. And the guy said, they let me in because they said that you was the guy that knowed the most about important stuff. And he immediately gets nervous. He says, I hope I ain't bothering you a whole lot, but there's a question I've been wanting to ask somebody all my life. My old man died. Horse kicked him in the head, and so plus he drank a lot. The guy's getting really nervous now. He goes, well, I'm late for something. Could you go ahead and he knows it's going to be trouble because it's suddenly, he just knows this guy is going to say, why is the sky blue? And he thinks, I spent 40 years trying to cocoon myself. That's another, protect myself, complex myself superficially to the point, and hang around other cocoon people superficially sold to the point that they would not dare, it wouldn't cross their mind for them to come in and say, Dr. Schwartz, why is the sky blue? He just, I'm safe. And now this guy wandered in. The guards, we're going to have to talk to somebody. They shouldn't let people like this in on the campus because he's going to show up to this expert and go, why is that up instead of down? You didn't lose your place, right? We have experts amongst the collective because the collective, everyone understands this, does not know anything the individual wants to know. But now if we were all standing out there, I say we now generically that we were all back at the ordinary level, if you're standing there in this wide field, I think it's known sometimes as life, and as far as you see are fellow cows, heifers, steers, or wolves, whatever one you like, and they all seem to be about the same height. Seem like, I guess, the ultimate form of communism or socialism or heaven, according to the Dunders. Did you look around? Everyone seems to be about the same level. You're not, there's several ways to look at it. You're not then going to turn around to a cow next to you and go, why is the sky blue? It wouldn't even cross your mind. You just look around and you don't need a mirror. You can see your reflection in the other cow's eyes and you realize, damn, I'm as dumb looking as he or she is. So it wouldn't cross your mind. Or if you did slip up and turn around and say, why is the sky blue? The other cow's going to go, hey, what I look like? A correspondence course in higher education? In other words, the cow's going to go, hey, I'm here with you. What I know? So you need experts, even though everyone understands that experts do not know anything. But it's part of the way things are wired up that the more they are an expert, the more superfluously so must be your inquiries, your questions, your field of interest, so that they too may dance when it's their turn and go, an interesting question. I used to ask that when I was younger. Sit down, son. Let me give you a history of this kind of question. An expert is like a form of distraction so that you will not ask a point-blank question. But you notice there are anomalies, little strays in the herds of life that will take this sort of observation if they didn't do it on their own, but they would use that as a foundation for attacking civilization. Like, well, you're right. You're just saying that people are dumb. No, they're not dumb. You're just saying that it's all some kind of charade that people are playing, pretending that they're educated and know what they're doing and they don't. You can't call it pretending when everybody's playing. If you can think it's you not playing, or if you're just an ordinary cynic, just an ordinary critic, in a sense you're not playing. But you're not playing then on the basis that everybody else is on stage engaged in the play, in the drama, and for some reason they won't let you on. Or else you don't think they'll let you on. Or else you're too shy, or your complexion's bad, or you're underweight or overweight, your nose is too big. In other words, you're playing in a sense. It's not psychological, but in a sense you're playing. Look up there, everybody pretending. Of course, by now you should be able to make up as many stories as you want You can be a social critic, criticizing anything you want to in as intelligent and educated sounding way as possible, sticking out your tongue, laughing at the people, pretending that they're big shots there in universities, and they can't even tell you why the sky. You can make up your own story, make a little fable. Such a person, all they got to do is suddenly get a phone call, and they say, we've had our eye on you, and the president of the university died, and we decided to take a bold new leap into the future. We want you to be president of this university. We know it's a surprise. We know that you never asked for the job, but we want you. You know the answer. Is the man going to say, ha, you say I'm going to play in that kind of fallacious, superficial game? The man would scratch off like the Roadrunner in a cartoon getting over there. So, I just wanted you to understand, at the ordinary level, those who are criticizing life, or that might take what I just said in a very crude way, and say that's true, everything that passes for being the world of the intellect or the world of any kind of significance in life is just a crop of it. People don't know what's going on. Priests don't know what's going on. Rabbis, educators, philosophers, they don't know anything. Boy, you put it to them, you're right. They don't know anything. That's not true. They know exactly what they're doing. That is, they know exactly as much as they should know. And at the ordinary level, the only people that criticize are those who, in a sense, are not actively a part of the drama. But now beyond all that, which is of minor consequence, or should be, then looked at from another view, from a non-partisan, a non-aggressive view of that. In other words, the criticism without the criticism, the observation, sans any rancor or aggression, then you're not playing also. And so it is basically an error intellectually if you were thinking about ordinary life as being in any way pretentious. Because when the majority of people, when civilization itself, when the herd and the collective intelligence in one sense is a dress up and let's pretend, when that's what's running everything, when that is the heartbeat of life and that is the healthy middle class of human life, you do understand it's no longer pretend. Not that it ever was actually pretend, but to say it's pretend, even if you go, yeah, it is. But if 99% of the people are on the little stage and they're wearing their mother's shoes and their daddy's hat, it's no longer pretend. Now back to where we were. Among man's experts, there are no experts on man. In life, you have experts for anything you want. If there's some new area, I don't know what, some new offshoot, let's say, of the attempts to build artificial intelligence, something new in electronics, let's call it the new field of Xology, I don't know what. But if it's a brand new field, enough that somebody's made up a term for it, then the next day, all right, within a month, there'll be an expert. If nothing else, the guy who invented the term. Even if he doesn't actively grab the title for himself, other people who hear this new idea, this new area of intellectual investigation or technology, within a week, people who can hear it, if it's going to have legs, those of you who remember that's laws of physics put into a Broadway terminology. If it's going to be an alive field for a while, then within just immediately, there are going to be people who hear it and go, ah, aha, that is going to apparently answer something, or as they put it, address an area in which they were already beginning to think themselves. And so within a few days, though, if it is taking on a certain life, there must be an expert. I didn't get all confused for you already, did I? In other words, great group of cows, humanity, and suddenly one cow over here by himself that's been interested in one area, he says, I've decided that one way to look at market research, one way to look at time analyzation for physical labor is, and he comes up like a new law. The cow's name is, Dr. Merriweather. And he says, I consider this to be, if I may say so, Merriweather's law, or anyway, it's the law of modern time analyzation or time use. And he comes, or psychological ergonomics. And he comes up with some little something, and if it's enough, it actually is some part of the way the herd's moving intellectually, then within a few days, there'll be a whole group of people will kind of follow him over and go, huh. And it will become, it'll be written up in a magazine. It may start off in Newsweek with just a little thing, and then maybe within a year, it'll be a front page. The whole new aspect of economics, physics, or something. forget physics, if it's going to confuse it, make it more of intellectual, human-made. Within a few days, though, there must be an expert in the field. This cow that came up with this new Meriwether's Law of Psychological Ergonomics. And a group of cows wander off with him. They stand over there, kind of redoing Plato in the academy, except now it's a cow and some little heifer standing around. And they look for leadership. They're all agreeing. They're beginning to discuss. They're beginning to add to Meriwether's Law of Psychological Ergonomics. But they begin to look around and something's missing. What's missing? I'm glad you asked. An expert. It's too early to have an institution. There is no real collective within that the whole collective herd. But so they need an expert. And even if the cow, even if Meriwether doesn't go, which he probably will, but even if he doesn't, well, that was not an attack on cows' egos. That's not the point. But even if Meriwether is not all that pushy, within a few days, that now we have, the thing is come alive, the field of psychological ergonomics, as proposed by Professor or Mr. Meriwether last week. Within just a short period of time, very short, they'll look for some kind of expert, and if nothing else, they'll look to him. He'll become the expert because he's the one who coined the term psychological ergonomics. Who better, he's the guy that thought of it. You've got to have an expert to keep something alive. And what I'm trying to get you to see is then why. Because whatever it is that was man-made in a sense is simply within certain limits. It's simply putting new horses on old merry-go-rounds. And everybody knows it. In other words, they know what I wanted to know originally, back when I was a little nipper. I don't know. I'm probably past the point of caring a lot. Every now and then I think about it, and every now and then I'll read some article and I hear some new term like psychological ergonomics. I just read that the other day. And it's almost like, childhood again. Like the first time I opened Playboy and go, God almighty, life is worth living. Kind of past the hormonal level, I can remember the intellectual level, and this idea of just the term. When I just saw the term psychological ergonomics, I thought, Jesus, it was like my little intellectual heart. And yet, by and large, sane, ordinary people know that, this is not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. They don't really know anything. And so what helps keep it going? Since whoever come up with the term psychological ergonomics, almost nobody ordinarily analyzes it in these words, but here's the way it works. Is they see it, and I'm not going to try to analyze it verbally for you, because you've all been through it. Somebody describe a book to you that they just read. It may take them a few sentences or something, or somebody describes a lecture they heard, and just something suddenly will hit you, or has done it in the past, and you go, what was the name of that book? Or where's this guy talking? Who was that? Because it's like one of the last breaths of intellectual fresh air, young air when you were a kid, before you started dying. It almost brings it back. You go, well, what was that book? Maybe I'll read that. And yet you know you're not. Or if you do, it's not going to be what struck you there just for a second. Nothing wrong with that. That's part of stability and sanity. But, in a sense, to help compensate for that you know that whatever the latest field intellectual is, doesn't amount to anything. It is going nowhere. It's going round and round. Part of what distracts man from having to face that is to have an expert in the field. That's part of the job. Contrary to somebody that's not playing the game, just some sorehead off the stage going, well, you're right, those experts don't know crap. That's because he couldn't get a job as an expert. That's because one time he changed his name to Meriwether and came up with a theory or a law, and all the cows around him went, and they wandered off. Of course, now he's mad. It's not that. But the job of experts, in a sense, is to help distract from the fact that they don't know anything. Not just them, but those to whom they seem to be leaders. That's part of being an expert. Well, maybe I overkilled it. Some of you seem to have gotten a few weeks ago, I pointed out, with no offense, because it can be a good hobby, education. But that is part of the point of degrees and awards. Literally. Which is sort of, I guess you could call it a joke. since I guess I made it up, you can call it anything you want to, but it's like a man, somebody addressed a question to him, and he says, well, he doesn't know the answer. Or the questionnaire finally assumes he doesn't, so wait a minute, you don't really know anything. And the guy's attitude is, and he points behind him, award after award, several degrees, a prize here and there. And his attitude is, as it should be, is, well, I don't have to know anything. I have a PhD. Now, you can get a joke probably out of just a nightclub with some similar joke, set up to that. But it's not a joke. It's not sarcastic. That is part of having all these degrees. It's to prove that I don't have to know anything. To compensate that somebody does walk in and say, are you the guard let me in, are you the head of the physics department? Yes. Well, now you're the guy that not only, but you were once in this, what they call the yes, I was in the philosophy department. But in later years, I switched over and went back to graduate school, and now, all right, well, you're the guy I was looking for. What I want to know is literally, why is the sky blue? Why is this up? Where's the question? The head of the theology department. Are you the world's greatest theologian? So they say. What's the purpose of life? Hey, listen, I don't have to know that. Do you see these degrees? No one can see that at the ordinary level without there being, what was the word? A certain amount of rancor. A certain amount of bile and piss. For those of you that didn't get that news on tonight, I'm not sure I can quote it, but it said that any new ideas to have a life in the cow's public marketplace must be flavored with bile and piss. For a new idea to take over, apparently, it has to be an attack on a past idea. For anybody, for Merriweather, anybody to get his horse on the merry-go-round, the same old merry-go-round, but to get his horse or his new paint job of a horse, that here it is, it's the Merriweather color-coordinated horse. Whereas before it was some other horse. Before it was just Macmillan's psychological horsey. Perhaps with a semicolon or a subtitle as related to time analysis. But now Merriweather comes along and he wants to repaint the horse, and of course wants it named after him, and it's going to be the law, the Merriweather law of psychological ergonomics. To get the horse painted his color, to get a new idea. How many times I have to ask in 30 minutes have I gotten you too lost? To get any new idea to sell, to walk, to develop any legs, to begin to breathe in the public marketplace, it has to be flavored with a certain amount of bile and piss. That is, it has to be based some way on an attack on an existing idea for this apparently, quote, fresh, new idea. It can't just be brand new. The brand new idea, the brand new theory, the brand new law, the brand new idea has got to, in some way, be pissing on a previous idea. It's got to be a criticism of it. It's got to be an improvement over it. To do that, you must look to experts. They're experts, back to the tail end of the sentence. You realize 10 words and we spent 30 minutes on like 4 of them? All right. Among man's experts, there are no experts on man. Anything, any field of humanity is where we were, whatever it is. Psychological ergonomics or something old, religion, art appreciation, art criticism. Anything that man has invented has experts. Any field that is alive enough that it has a name and you've heard of it, there are experts in the field. I mean, there's nothing strange about that. It's just a fact. Except one area. There are no experts on man. Does anyone find that interesting? Now that I present it that way, and you think there are experts in every field, whether you are interested in the field or not, whether the field is minute within the overall body of life, or whether it's a large field. There are experts. If it is a distinct, identifiable area of human life, there are experts in the field, recognized experts, experts who will say, yes, I am an expert if you ask me directly. You know, I'm not bragging, but my God, look at my life here behind me on the wall. I mean, where do you think I got these degrees? You know, I have a box of Cracker Jacks. 30 years of my life. Yes, I'm an expert. Now, what's the question? All right. They're experts in every field, but one. There are no experts on man. And don't fool yourself. I started to be crude and say, don't let them fool you, but come on, you're big boys and girls. Face up to it. Forget them. Because then you've got to go, who are them? The old man gave the kid the kid gave himself advice, didn't he? It's not them. So don't fool yourself. Say, yes, they are attempted experts at man, psychologists, psychiatrists, even priests. They don't even try. No offense to them, but they're not even trying. Right? If they were trying, then they would have come up long ago. They wouldn't have had to wait around here for 1990, whatever year this is, 3, for me to point out that it only took 3,000 years for Copernicus to point out, wait a minute, I can prove that man is not the center of the universe. And now after the fact, everybody goes, that was a major, discrete shock and jump in the evolution of man, because after that, no one could believe any longer that man was the center of the universe. And I had to point out to you, rhetorically, do you really think that for 3,000 years there was nobody on this planet, not a few strange people, that understood with no telescope, no Copernicus, no nothing but their own brain, their own ties to the genetic web of life, that just a few people, you think there was nobody here that ever understood, that never even entertained the thought that we were the center of the universe? It's too direct. An expert wouldn't think of that. That would be a qualification of an expert on man. But that's not what the ordinary would pass off, as they're supposed to, as experts on man. Because you would be, if you were part of the herd and looking in the correct place, which you're part of the herd, what choice have you got? You would be looking to the world of academia. You would be looking at psychology, psychiatry, sociology, all the social sciences, all the soft sciences. Those that are more malleable and agreeable, easier to sit on, easier to lay down on. Which is why man loves, the more civilized a man is, the more he is inclined to favor the social sciences, and why they came up with the subtitle of the soft sciences as opposed to those hard ones like mathematics. That doesn't give any leeway to say 2 and 2 is 4, God damn it. Hey, a man with sexual problems shouldn't be just turned out of society. Now see, that's like a thought, an equation from the soft sciences. Well, not all men are macho. Well, that's more like it. I mean, that gives you a little room to, you know. But then you get into the hard sciences, 2 and 2 is goddamn 4. There's no way out. And the guy figures, well, sometimes I feel sensitive and I want to cry. You know, if he was ruled by the laws of mathematics rather than the rules of psychology and masculine psychology, whatever the new branch is, and it just said 2 and 2 is 4, and it's like, oh hell, there's no room to move. At any rate, don't let yourself mislead yourself, is what I'm getting at, that I still support that news item that says they're experts in everything, in every field except one. That man has an expert for everything except an expert on man. And it is, I guess, stand it up, if you can see it, I said it was, you should find it sort of interesting that it's neat that no one tries. But it's always doubly neat that no one notices. Because in their view, and correctly so, from ordinary views, that is not so. That we are surrounded by, always have been, society, civilization is replete with people attempting to study man. Part of our tax money goes for it. Religion does it in its own crude way, perhaps. Superstition. That you can just point out that the core thrust of civilization is an attempt for man to understand himself, to comprehend his place in the universe, and etc. And from that view, what can you say? Right on, right on. Except they don't. They can't. And all you've got to do is you look at dead, point blank, dead ahead, obvious walls, obvious aspects of life, and you see it, and you realize that man can't see that. You can't talk about it. Well, hell, you can talk about it, but nobody will listen. Not because they're wrong and you're right. There are no experts on man. You can see that there was another definition in there somewhere tonight of civilization. That civilization is a substitute, a collective substitute for the attempt at individual thinking. And if I'd started on that one earlier, we could have used that in somewhat the same way as I did the rest of it. And again, ordinary people could take that, an ordinary social sorehead, and say, yeah, you're right. You hang out with crowds, you begin to fall into the mob psychology. That whatever everybody else is thinking, you can fall right into it, and yeah, you're right. If you become a joiner, if you become a follower of something, of some cult, some religion, some public speaker, some anybody, yeah, you're right. It will be detrimental. It will stand in the way of individual thought. That's not it. That's just some little sorehead. The whole point, or one of the points of civilization, of man collecting himself up, is not only to produce experts, to help distract from the fact that experts do not know any more than you do, but, by God, look on the wall behind them. Part of the purpose of civilization is that men all get together, and the more they collect together, the stronger you seem. Whenever you seem in doubt, intellectually, you don't have to seem in doubt for long. You just kind of look around, you can just almost smell it. Surety, stability in the air. It's like sometimes suddenly you don't feel good, or your hormones are not right, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you suddenly think about death, and you could almost cry. And you look out the window, and there's some cars going by. It's 2 a.m. You go see a paper truck go by. Well, it's like you look at life and you realize, and you don't analyze it, of course, but it's like you get it over it. That everything's all right. You know, without analyzing it, here I'm doing it for you in words, just one possible verbal picture that I could do of others. But it's as though, as long as you've got everybody else out there, then these words kind of fears are made more tolerable. It's like, why should you be laying there crying, 40 years old, college education, no reason, nothing happened, you just woke up and you almost want to cry. And you look out and it's like, even in the middle of the night, there are people out there at work, people that had to get up at 1 to go out and deliver papers, people like picking up garbage. And it's like, as long as the collective's there, and they're not all, suddenly the whole world, you look out your window, and cars didn't stop at the same moment you woke up. And people got their cars, and they're grown people going, and it's kind of like, well, chin up, old man, you know. Everybody else is, you know, muddling through, and it's kind of like, well, I'll muddle through. Now, if you can get past the hormonal level into the neural level, that is what civilization's about. And nobody analyzes it this way, but it's like, well, I'm surrounded by other decent people, God-fearing, educated, cleaned up, walking around, owning cars, people, and they don't know any more than I do. It's sort of like, well, maybe I'll make it through. Of course, people who enjoy this sort of thing don't find that quite acceptable. Especially once you realize, well, you're right. Everybody's going to make it through. The dumbest person I ever met, the dumbest person I could be, is going to live as long as I did. We're both going to die at about the age of 72, based upon all the actuarial tables. They'll live just as long as me. They may be richer than I am, if that meant anything. They may be more famous, or may be better looking. This ain't going to do. Of course, you were supposed to have shut up and ate your vegetables a long time ago. That is, life offered to feed you your parents. You remember that news item? That life says, feed the children first, because they're always being fed first. That's why you reach a certain age and you begin to die. Life said, feed the children first. Life said, feed the children their parents. And you turn into a critic. You turn into Meriwether. You turn into trying to eat up your parents neurally. That is, you try to improve on it. Look at the rundown merry-go-round they left us with. Well, we'll fix that. Bring out the paint. Of course, they think, bring out the new ideas. Bring out, finally, the age of enlightenment. Bring out the millennia. But all it is repaint those horses. And a few people do not. Some people find their parents that taste as bad as broccoli. Some people find the past. Some people understood a news item from a few weeks ago that was a law. That was before I changed my name from Meriwether. It said those who look back deserve what they see. And if you're ordinary, you're always looking back because there's nothing else to eat. You got to look back. If you're going to get fresh, new ideas and be able to think for yourself, what's the first thing you got to do? That. You got to back up and get some severe tire damage. And then go, well, God damn, look what they did. Leave around 4,000 or 5,000 years worth of people before me, before I got here, and just look. I mean, they were on the verge of destroying everything. And you back up a few inches to criticize it and point it out, and sure enough, you suffer severe tire damage.